Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, this isn't a theorem video. It kinda needs a bit more time to cook. I'm sorry. For now, let's get into this video and I hope it will entertain you. This idea came to me from this NGA resource about ownership rates in honkaistarrail, and like a flashbulb, it came to me naturally, and I decided to write it down for a video. Now, this resource only goes back to 2.4 as far as I know. So the only ones unaccounted for it right now are Facial, Lingsha, and Rappa. As I'm sure most of my audience knows, being a popular unit doesn't strictly mean that a unit is better or good. A lot of things go into why some characters are owned less, like timing, lack of hype and story. As another disclaimer too, this is only one source, but there is 15,963 samples that I assumed are scanned. So again, don't take this as a complete fact, but nevertheless, I'm going to give you my interpretations of why these units have a low ownership rate and their actual value in comparison to their ownership rate. First, the least owned character in Honkai Star Rail is Boothill at 16.5%. Honestly, I'm more surprised that Boothill isn't lower, but I'm not surprised he's last either. Boothill is not a weak character by any means. Even if you compare him to Facial, he is the premier one-button nuker, and he's not slow either. Like in Viber to Lune, he doesn't have that disadvantage. He outputs very big screenshot damage multiple times in a single cycle. He's versatile in a lot of teams, arguably the most versatile DPS in the game actually. He's not even that reliant on his signature light cone, making him free-to-play friendly, and he's a really fun unit for veterans who have a lot of characters that he can play around with. So what's his issue? He's definitely a lot more consistent than some characters above him, and outright better because of the current meta. Well, first of all, he hasn't had a rerun yet, which does affect how many people have him. And I'm sorry to sound a bit misandrist, but we have to be realistic here. He's not a waifu. I know a lot of people play Love in Deep Space, and I know that a lot of people subscribe to me somehow have ties to the yaoi fanbase. I don't know why this is, don't ask me about it. But clearly, most of the general Honkai Star Rail player base are not women, or are incredibly bisexual, or sometimes both. Again, I'm not saying that's wrong, but he was placed between waifus, meaning he even had less of a chance. Even if Boothill is pretty strong, I don't think people are willing to push away their bias to Firefly or Robin. And it's not far-fetched to think Boothill Wanters didn't have anything left after Robin, and Ron May very shortly after had a rerun, so it was obvious that Boothill's banner wasn't gonna work out pretty well. They also did him pretty dirty in the story too. Every other Penacony character had some really good amount of screen time before or during their banner. Boothill had probably the least amount of lines, I'm gonna have to check that, but while he is likable, ultimately he didn't have nearly as good of a screen time as someone like Aventurine, Acheron, and Firefly. Those two are in a collab event, by the way. I mean, what can I say? Hoyo loves playing favorites. Next is Jade at 19.2%. Jade as a unit is pretty polarizing. Nobody can deny that she is the best pure fiction character in the game and can brute force it, despite being the game mode that has the strongest blessings, which is pretty impressive. She shows up every now and again in MOC since it's kind of a mixed bag, and she finally got that AoE apocalyptic shadow that she quite literally stomps open. Plus, she is a mommy. Anyway. Why is Jade not owned a lot? She's sexy, is top 1% in one game mode, and did I mention that she's hot? Well, her specialization is exactly why people didn't want to pull her. Jade is only really reliable in pure fiction, which isn't really seen favorably in the community as being difficult. Not saying that I agree with it, but that's the general consensus. Pure fiction having really strong yet available picks like Himiko or Herta probably back this up and doesn't really help Jade either. A lot of people have differing opinions on this matter of Jade's value, but it seems that, at least in this case, that it was enough to get people to not want to pull her. She also was directly after Firefly, which again doesn't help anybody but Firefly herself. She had some screen time, but clearly not enough to get people really invested into her. And while she is a mommy, looks aren't everything. You can look at the Genshin ownership rate as evidence of that with Eula and a bunch of other characters. Even conventionally attractive women aren't safe from being less owned. Did you guys figure figure out that I really like Jade, by the way? Okay, anyway, let's move on. Next is Yunli at 23.3%. Almost a quarter of the player base has her. I'm not really surprised, and it's not Yunli's fault, to be honest. Yunli is an excellent unit and is really good for certain new accounts because she can tackle all endgame modes very well and very reliably. She can take advantage of practically any good support in the game. Ron Mei, Ting Yun, Sparkle, Robin, and Zhao Cho, she can use all of them, and there's not a lot of differences between most of them, except for maybe Robin. Her self buffs are appropriate for being a dual damage dealer too, so she could use March 7th. She's very versatile. Overall, Yunli is a really good free-to-play option character. He didn't power creep E6 Clara just to be mad. So, what's wrong with Yunli? I think Yunli's parry mechanic, it didn't really appeal to the right people, I think. Yunli's mechanics can be annoying for a new player, and I think new players would have gotten the most out of her. And I think, like Sparkle before Acheron, people were smelling that Fei Xiao was going to be the big money draw from a mile away and just decided Yunli wasn't going to be worth it and let's just save for Fei Xiao, which turned out to be a pretty good idea too. Zhao Cho probably impacted it too because Acheron fans want their wife to do more damage, and at the very least Zhao Cho is a support, meaning he will inevitably show up more than Yunli in most content. In conclusion, Yunli is a really good character, and I think she'll see better results when she gets a rerun because she scales really well with every support, and supports dictate most of the game. But she did suffer mostly from bad timing, and people just weren't interested in her mechanics despite how good it is. Number 4, Argenti, coming in just shy of 23.3%. This guy had a rerun unlike the previous characters. This is not good. In terms of his kit, Argenti is one of the better characters. He's a lot like Jade, where his pure fiction performance is extremely good and also pretty hilarious. He doesn't really care about enemy count, so it's fine to put him in MOC most times. In Apocalyptic Shadow, there are some fights where he was used, but his team structure doesn't really lend itself to being part of blessings most of the time, and doesn't lend itself to high toughness damage for the mechanics, but he can still perform well enough given the correct strategy. Overall, he's just a pretty decent character. So why is Argenti here? He's kind of a character that has an acquired taste. People that really like Argenti will really like him, but a lot of people are mostly indifferent to the type of character that he has, I feel like. And honestly, when Argenti originally released, there was Jing Liu, and worst of all, Ron Mei was directly after him. So yeah, he was cooked either way. The combination of bad timing, he's a guy, screen time, doesn't appeal to the majority, and honestly, if we taxed him because he had a rerun, then he probably is worse than Boothill. Because these days, Argenti's teams are not in fashion anymore, that I doubt his rerun actually gave him even 10% more ownership, sadly. And our last person of the day is Black Swan at 28.8%. Finally, quarter of the player base. Black Swan at the time of this chart was not reran yet. Yeah, that was on 2.5. Black Swan power-wise is practically a requirement for running DOT to be any bit competitive. I'm going to be judging her based on 2.0 standards because times have changed a lot and DOT is really, it's not good right now. In 2.0, DOT was really good though because they finally had Ron Mei, who at the time benefit double DPS teams the best, and the most well-developed double DPS teams are Ratio and Topaz, Himiko Herta for pure fiction, and of course DOT. And well, you know, she's hot. She's appeared in the story and trailers as someone that kind of has this mystique and feels really important, but apparently that wasn't enough. So what happened at 2.0 is a combination of people realizing that there's a Raiden Mei banner on the horizon, which is historically a safe assumption that you should save for her and ignore everybody else. And I think the bigger fact is that DOT is kind of expensive. Again, we're judging by the standards of 2.0, so DOT being weak isn't that big of a deal. DOT as an archetype has a really unique flaw where a limited unit is practically required to run it, which in Swan's case, she really needs Kafka to be a damage deal. But Kafka doesn't have a high ownership rate either, surprisingly. And she's already had a rerun, so that's not good either. DOT was just a team that was a very high investment that I don't think a lot were willing to go for despite the large assets that it has. And there we go. That's the least owned characters, 5 of them in a nutshell, and why they were not owned as well. Anyway, this was fun. Again, I'm sorry for delaying the theorem. I want it to be good, well researched, and have nice quality, all that good stuff. Do all the algorithm stuff, like, share, subscribe, comment down below what you think, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.